And hello, Raiders. Hope everyone's having a wonderful time doing the Yoshi Fusion. We are currently at 60 fragments in, and we're about halfway through the fusion now. As far as my personal progression goes, I've actually made it all the way up to 112, which is a very difficult stage. The stage where there's a bunch of Torments and Gurgos and Cernics. Not quite completed that as of yet. And I've recently built out, let's see here, was Darkalane, Seeker, and Raglan for the champion training tournament. Of course, everyone loves champion trainings. But today's video, we're going to talk about keeping a rare of every faction. And we do this because, unfortunately, the game kind of yells at us to do this. You have to keep a rare for clan boss if you want to complete this advanced quest. And you also need to complete, do a faction war stage with a rare for all the various factions. So at most, 2 factions are going to be open at any one time. It could be any 2. You could get away with keeping a rare of all factions except 1. But I'm going to recommend that you just keep 1 of each faction. And let's talk about who those would be. For the Banner Lords, one of the better offensive ones is Dagger with her AoE decrease attack and decrease defense. Or excuse me, single target decrease attack and AoE decrease defense. Another good option you might bump into pretty early on is a Valerie. And Valerie's big skill is her energizing presence, where she can increase buff durations and decrease debuff durations. Kind of serves as a mini cleanse for very short debuffs. So I would pick one or the other and hang on to those. The rest of these aren't super great, but as far as keeping an eye out toward the end game, those 2 are your best options. High Elves has a number of choices. You may have started with Elaine, so you just keep her. Apothecary is pretty much a super high tier rare that almost everyone builds, simply because of his boost of speed, so keep your Apothecary. And Reliquary Tender is a very good carry for getting you through content in the game by removing debuffs and raising your dead allies. I would recommend keeping Reliquary Tender and a Apothecary around for High Elves. We move on to the Sacred Order. Not great choices here. Personally, I started the game out with Aethel, so I've been keeping her around. But over time, I would recommend Draconis as your 1 rare to keep for this faction. He can do a heal on his A1, shield your champions on a 3-turn cooldown, and you can remove debuffs from an ally and heal them. Not a bad champion, but Sacred Order's kind of lacking for good rare champions that you'd actually keep even in the end game. Moving on to Barbarians. Barbarians is easy. War Maiden. Everyone likes War Maiden. Not only is she dressed for summer, but she's the probably best rare AoE decreased defense champion. So keep on to War Maiden. Hang on to her. You probably pick her up early game, and you'll probably keep her until you stop playing. As far as the Ogren tribes goes, the standout guy here is Belor. You can get your hands on a Belor at some point. You'll keep him and use him. Honorable mention will go to Gear Grinder, one of the few people that can actually revive a dead ally in this faction. The rest of these aren't anything special to write home about. I would pick one of those two and lean toward Bellower personally. Moving on to Lizardmen. Lizardmen have some pretty terrible options. I would keep one of these two. This is Metal Shaper. And the reason why Metal Shaper has become popular recently is because of the way the Scarab boss is currently tuned, where if you attack the Scarab boss in the Doom Tower without a shield, he counterattacks you. So if you do a turn meter tease strategy, you need a shield up at all times, and you got 2-turn shield on a 2-turn cooldown. Prior to Scarab, probably Haruspex would have been your choice here. He's an okay champion. He's kind of like a mini apothecary a little bit here with a revive. He's got a little bit of speed in arena, but he's not super great, but he's not super bad either compared to what's going on in this faction. So pick one of these depending on what you need, and I would suggest hanging on to them. Moving on to the Orcs. Orcs have actually pretty terrible choices, in my opinion. If you start out with Gallic, just keep them around. Otherwise, Veteran tends to be the best of the bunch. So keep your Veteran. He's also used sometimes early on for his decreased attack and clan boss. So if you happen to need that and you're earlier in the game, here you go. Here's a decreased attack option. He's also a defensive based hero. A lot of his skills scale off of defense. Defense, and attack. I would probably ignore the attack and just build up his defense. And he will satisfy your keep a rare for every faction requirement. Moving on to the Demon Spawn. You got a couple of good choices here, Demon Spawn. Diabolist, who you get from stage 12, isn't a bad choice. A bit of a turn meter controller. So we'll speed up your entire team on RA2 and RA3. You'll do a turn meter manipulation. 50% up for you, 50% down for the enemy. The next choice tends to be Fellhound. Kind of got an interesting get, or he has an area of attack A1, which is not very common. A very, very weak heal. Also has a block damage buff for 1 turn on an ally. I would suggest, or a note of caution, I have a Fellhound built up. I use him as my spider tank to do counterattack and lifesteal gear. Most of the time, he's going to opt to use one of these skills, especially this skill down on a 2-turn cooldown. So most of the time, he's just going to spam heals on your team. So you might consider not booking this skill, or hoping your books land here and here instead. I would recommend the Fellhound or the Diabolist for keeping that rare around. As far as the Undead goes, the clear winner here tends to be Frozen Banshee, probably one of the best land boss poisoners in the game. She's got a poison on her A1 as long as poison sensitivity is up. Oh, and by the way, she puts up poison sensitivity. So I would keep a Frozen Banshee around just for. I use one for Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss, and I've got her sitting around in case I need a rare for the Undead Hordes faction crypt. Doomscreech is not a terrible second choice, but I would still prefer going with the Frozen Banshee. Next is Dark Elves, and Dark Elves has way too many good heroes. You might start the game with Kale, so if so, you're going to keep him. Coldheart, probably the best rare in the game in terms of in-game progression, so you'll keep at least 1 Coldheart. Get your hands on it. People who use Paragon for the cheese strat to cheese the Nightmare campaign, or the last boss of Nightmare campaign kind of one-shots people, but he doesn't go through. unkillable. So he puts up unkillable over 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown, and that will get you through Nightmare Campaign, or at least in boss of Nightmare Campaign. Also, Painkeeper is also a solid hero. Got no lack of heroes to choose from in Dark Elves. Painkeeper is not only a very good early game support healer, you can heal your team by a percentage of her max HP on a 4-turn cooldown, and then decrease the cooldowns of your allies by 1 every 4 turns. So personally, I keep around a Painkeeper, a fully leveled Painkeeper, a fully leveled Cold Heart. Some people do 2 or 3 or more Cold Hearts. And I have like a partially built Paragon just to get through the Nightmare Campaign. As far as Knight Revenant goes, you got 2 pretty good options. First one is Renegade. I would recommend keeping one of these around just for her A3. She decreases the cooldown of all skills by 2 turns. Good for speed runs. Once you get later in the game, you don't need to build her out early game. Just keep her around so you have one. She only becomes obsolete if you got insanely lucky and pulled a couple Prince Kaimars. And then another good option, if you need an attack down champion for a clan boss, is Coffin Smasher, who will do decrease attack, cancel HP burn, and has this passive that reduces the damage you take from the clan boss by quite a bit. Moving on to the Midnight Remnants, Dwarves. Dwarves are kind of an interesting faction, but the standout here, in my opinion, is Kurzad Depart. And it's for this increase accuracy buff. Doom Tower and probably stage 25 dungeons are going to require more accuracy. And also can do a decreased defense debuff. It's not the big one, but at least you got something. I would suggest this guy for general keeping one of him around. He was actually involved in Diffusion, so I don't have him currently, but I do have some of his other options. Dilgul is an okay one. He also does a AoE attack that does decrease accuracy, which is useful in certain situations. It has a single target increased defense, also not too bad. For clan boss, Bulwark is often considered because of his passive, so he can extend the duration of a debuff on the attacker in clan boss. And with the clan boss doing AoE hits, this will do your extensions. So I would suggest keeping probably Bulwark or Kurzad long term, just to have one around for the rare requirement. Dilgul is there in a pinch, but the void rares are generally where it's at here. Last but not least are the Shadowkin, and I'm not even comfortable making a suggestion at this point. For starters, I don't have any of the rares here, and just at a glance, I think it's too early to tell. Shadowkin were just recently released. I mean, I would keep one of them for when the faction crypt actually does open. However, which one I think is too early. I think they will be adding more Shadowkin very shortly. And that's a rare for every faction. Personally, the ones I've been keeping, I've been trying to tag with a star. Did I not do? I should have mentioned Fleshmonger and the Skinwalkers, and I skipped over Skinwalkers. Didn't I? I did. Totally did. Apologize. My recommendation for Skinwalkers is Fleshmonger, because this faction just takes so long to do. He's one of the only champions that can put decreased defense out there. on your as an AoE. It's 75% chance, but at some point you might want that faction to go faster, and Witchmonger is probably going to help with that. But I've been going through my inventory of champions and marking them with just a single star if they're not already built. Just to tell myself, hey, I might not want to crash these. And in general, I have a bunch of rares I'm trying to evacuate to make space. So yeah, so as you graduate from building out any rares, as you clean these guys out, make sure you keep one for every faction and then one for the clan boss, and this will allow you to always do your advanced quest. Anyway, that was the topic for today, and good luck and happy raiding.